Hello. So we're Sarah and Bex, and together we are Unlearn and Publish, and we are launching our new publication Fold, which is kind of a printed, curated platform that works a little bit like a gallery on paper. We've been working on this project Fold for a couple of years, but we've recently obtained funding from Star and Shadow, which is also supported by Arts Council England, and I think it's called micro projects. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we've recently obtained a bit of funding in order to print our first issue that we've been working on for a little while, which is great. This issue focuses on humour in art, and we've got a range of different artists that have presented a range of sort of different pieces of work that you can view in lots of different ways across the publication and online. We're really fortunate today to speak with Eli Samuels, who is going to be talking to us about the work that she has submitted. And she's put in a range of kind of films and images into the first publication, so we're really excited to talk to her about her work, and we thought we'd do a little Q&A today just to learn a bit more about it and to hear a bit more about who she is and what she does as a practitioner. Thanks so much for doing this today.
I'm honoured that you asked me.
Well, 2 years on, it's finally actually happening.
I guess like a good starting point might be to ask how you think teaching has affected your work.
Get an awful lot of really funny art that kids produce, which is one of the highlights of it. Like weird portraits that they do, like kind of weird, like kind of phrase when we do typography projects, the crazy phrases they come out with. But it is all part of the process, and yeah, it's like it definitely I think helps me understand why I enjoy making art, because when you're teaching it and you see a child that suddenly like gets it, or they have an idea, and it's kind of much as often I find as a teacher I don't really understand what the idea is. I'm like, right, just run with it and see what happens. And that's kind of I guess what artists are doing all the time, is just exploring and running with an idea. So definitely like for my own artwork, being a teacher definitely really helps inform what I do and why I do it. And yeah.
Do you encourage your kids when you're teaching them to think conceptually, or is that one step too far for them at that sort of age? Is it something that you try and encourage, or is it something, I mean, how does that work, sort of thing?
It's interesting. I think kids definitely have a bit of a fear of the word conceptual.
They really do. That's why I'm interested in, your sort of...
They often are working conceptually, but they don't realise they're working conceptually, because if you say like, if you're doing a kind of more art history lesson and we're going to be looking at conceptual art today, they're like, I don't get it, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't like it. However, if you're just often with just exploring a project by themselves, they are working conceptually, but you just have to not use the words, otherwise they are going to shut down and not want to engage with it. Yeah, I think it's quite I don't know why they're so scared of it, but they're so scared of the words conceptual art.
I think it's not just children that are scared of conceptual art. I think that's a really interesting kind of marginalised sort of part of what I suppose we do as practitioners, is that kind of that idea that people find a lot of what's made really inaccessible. And I guess that's what we're trying to do with Fold, and it's quite nice kind of comparing it to teaching kids art as well, because there's that kind of, I don't know, there's that essence of accessibility that I think really needs to be hammered home a lot more in kind of creative practice. And I don't know what anyone thinks about that.
And I do think oh, sorry, no, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's something in like the language itself, the language that's used. I mean, people always joke about like art speak and stuff like that, and I do think it can be really alienating, even myself, and I've studied it to university level, so I'm not surprised that kids in school automatically being like whatever. So
I think one of the things that kids are also like terrified of is writing it, like is discussing their work, is writing about work. And I think it's a subject that they're like, we don't need to explain it. In some ways that like, I kind of agree. I'm like, you know why you've done it. I know that you know why you've done it. That is kind of enough. But it is also important they are able to articulate just an initial idea or something. But it's interesting that you have mentioned that, because there is such a fear of this like kind of art talk, or even the kind of visual analysis of other people's artwork. I find they really struggle with, which is interesting. Like I think it's like, in some ways that's like the most basic type, like it's so easy to look and explore what you can see, but they do really struggle with it, which I find.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, in terms of like your kids, you were saying sometimes they come up with some really funny stuff, and I was wondering if that keeps alive your sense of humor in your work, because I feel like at university making fun, and we were at university together, I think making funny work is sometimes not always encouraged, because it's like, oh, this is high art or whatever. And I just wonder if, like, you know, there's like this playfulness that you appreciate with your kids' work and find a joy in that or something.
Yeah. I definitely think so. I think that like I love funny art. I mean, I love funny things in general. I love funny people. I love funny films. I love funny podcasts. I love funny art. Like I just love funny things. I think that some ways it's because sometimes if you're doing things that are very serious, I know that if I'm having a very serious conversation with somebody, I can get quite awkward. I'm not really sure what I want to say. And I think that's kind of the same with art. I feel like if I'm trying, sometimes like, although I find in my own practice, I am exploring quite kind of big and quite often quite kind of significant ideas, but I don't really want to explore them in a really, really serious way, because that's not my personality. That's not the way that I'd want to have a conversation about things. And I think that maybe it's a bit of a default that I go and try and make it humorous because it's my best way. I feel like I can kind of explore a bigger thing. And I think that that's exactly it. Maybe I'm really immature, but I do think that like that as well with kids, and that kids, if there's something funny and they can instantly engage with it, and then you can try and unpick it a bit more, then it's a far more effective way of getting to kind of the core message which is being explored. But yes, I definitely think that it's the same with kids, and basically I'm just making artwork like a child. It's probably why I'm a teacher as well. But
no, not at all. I guess I was like thinking, because in university I felt like it was sometimes discouraged by certain people with the idea of like high art has to be this certain way, and I totally disagree with that. And I think funny art is like amazing and really powerful. I found it quite interesting that you mentioned your kids make some funny work and you were kind of you seem to be enjoying that aspect of it. So yeah, I bet
with the kids though, it's probably something which, like, they're not being funny. I'm just finding it better. Like, I do think it is like definitely like making funny artwork is often but I mean, I know for me, as I said, there's a lot more to it than just being funny. But having things that are funny is such an accessible way of looking at artwork, because you actually don't think about the fact that it is artwork or it is conceptual or whatever these kind of words that are going around that people are so scared of art. It's just, you're just enjoying it, and then kind of helping you think about the big issue by just enjoying the work.
Out of interest, how hard do you work to make your work funny, or does it happen really organically, or is it something you really plan for?
It kind of depends on what I'm making work about. I got loads and loads and loads of slime, and I think if you're going to make a video and you're using like 8 kilos of slime, you don't need to do that much to make it funny. It is going to always be funny. But then I think some of the things around like the kind of language and things that I'm saying, that are things where I've picked up depending on what I'm making work about. So I made quite a lot of work looking at cooking shows, and I watched so many different cooking shows, and I just had this notepad just sort of writing down phrases that like Nigeria Lawson is saying, and I'm kind of saying the exact same phrase, but when it is kind of taking it out of that context, or just changing a word, or changing the kind of what part of the phrase, I'm changing the tone of a word or whatever it is. You can change something so that it changes the whole meaning of it, and then that stuff is a lot harder And I think there's a real danger, I find, that trying to make funny work that then isn't very funny is becomes very embarrassing very quickly. And I worry about that. But I think that's quite hard. That's probably the biggest challenge, is if you think something's funny, or if you're trying to say something like it's funny, but then it isn't very funny, can be quite dangerous. Yeah, I think it just depends on what the kind of humour is. So in my video, Comforting Minnie, I think that was a lot more about the language that I was using, because it was me comforting a friend and kind of using all these cliches over and over again on how to make this very sad person suddenly stop feeling so sad. So an oversized bar of chocolate, or a new puppy, or whatever it's going to be. And that one, it takes a long time to try and think of the right things that are kind of familiar, but then you're taking them out of context, so they feel a bit uncomfortable, and therefore it's funny. That's quite hard. But as I said, something where I'm like walking around in a massive oversized prop, or got something crazy. I made this video once where I had hundreds of wooden cooking spoons hanging around, and like kept on bashing my head on them, and that wasn't planned, but because I kept on bashing my head and was trying to dodge them, it was funny. And I think that it's just about what the video is.
Yeah. So going on the lines of like things not being funny, or being funny, or not trying to be funny but ending up funny, have you ever had anybody kind of look at your work? Because I also I don't try to make funny artwork, but I make work with satire in mind, and my intention is that it is funny, but it doesn't really matter if it isn't. But have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're showing your work and somebody's watching it dead seriously and isn't in any way understanding that it's meant to be humorous, and they're just really kind of basically, have you ever been put in a position where it's not having the desired effect, but somebody's reading it a completely different way, I suppose?
Yeah, I've had that so many times. I mean, it's so uncomfortable, but it's probably worse when people are watching it in front of you and doing like a fake laugh. That's probably the only thing which is worse than when someone does nothing. But yeah, I've had it so many times. Like I do every year when I get a new set of like the A-level kids, I always start off by showing them some of my artwork. They never find it funny. I don't know why I do it to myself, because they never ever find it. They find it uncomfortable. They don't like seeing their teacher in that context. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I was going to break down the kind of the barriers between them and me. But I always regret it straight away after showing them the work. You know, kind of funny. But right throughout kind of university, I've had it during teacher training. I did quite a lot of practical work, and it's when I had it so many times when people are just staring at it and find it uncomfortable to watch. I'm finding them watching it really uncomfortable, them not finding it very funny, me kind of laughing along with it because I still find it funny. The 20th view, it still like makes me laugh, and they're not finding it funny. And it is, I mean, but then maybe part of that is part of it. Like,
part of that is funny, but maybe the story you're telling of that now is funny. Like the story of its complete humour rejection by other people is a hilarious story to recount.
Yeah, and I think that with my artwork, although it is funny, it's also a lot of it is very uncomfortable, and that whether the kind of often it's just that I would be really like uncomfortably sweaty in the video, or be really out of breath, or be like mixing something that's making a really horrible like squelchy noise. And it isn't just meant to be funny, it is also meant to be about like the experience for the viewer, and they find it they find it uncomfortable. And often when things are uncomfortable, then your default is to laugh, and that can kind of be part of the humor. But some people will just find it uncomfortable, and that's something which I'm prepared to accept, because it's about more of an immersive experience often than just watching a video on a screen.
Do you think that funny can be a kind of discomfort though?
Yeah, I think so. I think that often you're laughing at something which you don't want to be laughing at. I hate it so much when someone is clearly making a joke and you're not able to find it funny, or having to do that kind of fake laugh. I find that really, really uncomfortable. I do think though, like, humour can definitely make people, it can do both. It can make people feel really comfortable and really relaxed in the situation, or it can do the opposite, and it can make you feel really uncomfortable and not really like you're sure what to say. But yeah.
Isn't that interesting, the span and the spectrum of emotion that it can have, though? I think that's quite interesting.
I mean, obviously, like, art is to a degree very subjective, and so is humor. But I think people are like, that's not funny, or that is funny. But it's interesting because obviously that's like an opinion, and people are coming from a different context. And I guess, like, you know, at our age, like, we're looking at things like memes, and you know, that's changed like the landscape of humor essentially. So, like, I guess I'm just wondering if that, do you think that there's like a way that maybe you've come to accept it through the fact that people just have differing responses to what is funny in itself, and like that maybe there's actually other things that are influencing your work that are quite new to the world as well?
Yeah, definitely. And also, so people having different like perceptions of what is funny, but also people have different feelings towards whether humor should be used in art. And some people can say like that like something is objectively funny, but it's not that's not what they would expect a piece of artwork to be. And like what you were saying earlier, Sarah, about people having like looking at artwork and thinking like that's not what we would expect art to be, because you wouldn't expect it to be like huge amounts of slime or whatever else is going on.
How dare you bring slime into the university, Ellie? This is an institution.
This is an academic institution, and no slime shall be brought in. But I guess I'm kind of interested. I think you handle your funny in quite different ways. I mean, we know how you do it within your film, but then you've already kind of referenced the sort of the giant props that you bring along, and the ways in which you kind of require your audience to view your work as well. Like I think when I first saw your work, I remember being in a room of a selection of props, and I was viewing it through these props almost, or in conjunction with these props. And I guess, is that something that's also important to kind of how your films are received? Is it that exhibition of it in that sort of novelty, massive way?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of the reason, so I make these props and they're all kind of very kind of like handmade, like bits of cardboard, like squashed together, and I like how wonky and wobbly they are, and I like the fact that you can get up close and you can see that there's like a bit of like, I don't know, cornflakes label sticking out the side or something, but that's kind of part is all meant to look very, very DIY, because that's what all of my artwork is really is done to that kind of like it's
that kind of lo-fi aesthetic kind of thing.
Yeah, and I like the props being alongside it. I also like the kind of combination of it being on the screen and in there in person, and it all be a little bit like weird and uncomfortable. But yeah, I think that it's just, I really want the like audience to be able to see how bad the props really are, I guess, and like them up close that they aren't very good, and I like people.
Yeah, because we've tried to kind of incorporate that into your sort of submission for Fold in terms of bringing in this little cut-out window. Yeah, I mean, is that something that you sort of are you pleased in the way that you've managed to incorporate that? And is that something can you see your work working across this kind of multitude of like different platforms and different ways in which it could kind of manifest in other ways, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's the first time I've ever done a piece like that, and I do like the idea that people can at home cut out a funny little screen and stick it on their laptop and watch through it, because it shouldn't really change the experience, but hopefully it will make you feel a bit more like it's a bit of a reader experience. It's not just watching something directly through a screen. It all looks a bit wobbly and a bit wonky, and maybe the screen will fall off halfway down and or thing. But again, that should hopefully kind of be part of the experience of watching the videos.
Why do you love DIY lo-fi aesthetics so much?
It really like is my favorite part of my practice, is making the actual. I think often I'll have the idea of the prop before the idea of the video, and therefore the kind of the idea of what it's going to be about. So for example, in one of my videos I've made this massive Arga, and I spent probably months and months making this Arga, and I never really questioned why I wanted to make this Arga. And it starts off that it was going to just be an Arga, just like this kind of box of it, And then I was like, oh, I need to be able to open the doors, and then I need to have oven trays inside, and like I just got so carried away with making it. But I just really like, I guess it's in a lot of ways, it's an element, it's problem solving. It's I'm giving myself very restricted materials. I just have like cardboard from like old boxes that I found often like in the skip, or I've got like mud rock or PVA glue and some newspaper, and just really, really limited materials. And I like to kind of push it and push it and push it and see how much I can do. I think that probably comes from a lot of like just things around play, and that just it feels a lot just like you're playing around and trying to work out what's going to happen, like what's going on and what's going to work and what's going to fail. And yeah, I mean, days where I'm in a studio and just making items is like, couldn't be a better way for me to spend a day. Like, I absolutely love it. And I think that the kind of the finish of them is often to show the process, is that I don't want them to be perfectly finished and really, really smooth. I want them to be able to see the materials that I've used, the kind of handmade quality of it, so you can see a kind of lumpy bits where I just gave up basically and stuck something on, or that you can see that bits that like I ran out of paint and I've had to use a second colour because I couldn't be bothered to go to shop or whatever it is. And I do really like to be able to see that element, and that is definitely in a lot of ways like a conscious decision that I don't want these props to look really, really smooth and finished. I want them to look lumpy and bumpy, and I want to then present them in a way where they're like hanging awkwardly in this room, or they're lying on the floor, so you might need to you might trip over them or whatever it's going to be. I want them in a way which makes you look at them and kind of question them a little bit more of what they're doing and why they're there. And often that's also the way that I would use them in the films as well, whereas I'll make a prop and then I'll be carrying it around and it's a bit too big and I'll kind of not really sure what to do and where and what to do and where to put it, or it's there and it's kind of too small or too big. And I like the kind of playing around using these props to again add to like the element of humor, but also to make the audience look at them a little bit more and wonder what their purpose of them is. I mean, I wonder what the purpose of them is a lot of the times. I just know that it feels like I enjoy making them and they are there for a reason, and it gives me the idea for the film.
It feels like a nice combination with your performance in the work, because it feels like it's like an imitation of a real life thing, and it's not trying to be that in any way. It's like a satire, or it's like a reflection of it that could be different or something. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on how you view the performance in that similar way, or how it differs. How do you view your performance in relation to the objects?
That's a really good question. I think I guess there's so I can answer it in so many different ways, if I'm being honest. I think that a lot of my kind of real interest in making art is looking at different kind of people. So I've looked at that in loads of different ways. So through this kind of caricature of a stereotype, but then through really trying to create characters, and really kind of like documenting people. And that was probably as like the origin of what my work was about, because I did have a real, and I still do have a real interest in just characters, I guess. I made this piece years ago where it was called road restriction, and it was about a road restriction that in a fictional street that there was a group of like the residents on the street was putting in half the street really wanted to get a width restriction at the end of the road to slow down traffic, and the other half of the street really, really didn't want to get it done. And I just got so into it. I was making all of the different, had about 12 different Google like Gmail addresses, because I made all the email addresses of the different residents, and having these really detailed, very dull conversations about the residents. And it really wasn't based on like a stereotype in any kind of, well, definitely not initially. It wasn't based, it was just looking at these characters. And I think that was probably what a lot of my work was really, really interested in, was just looking at these kind of people and asking about how they were typed, what their Gmail address was going to be, how their sign-off emails at the end, if they'd use slang, how formal they were. Like there was so much I was really interested in building these characters from scratch. And I think that's probably what a lot of my work does originate from, is looking at characters. But then definitely I think probably it's just because it is more fun to be able to like exaggerate these characters, which does definitely play stereotypes, but then also opens up kind of wider discussions around stereotypes, and especially around kind of, a lot of my work is really looking at gender, and the way that gender, particularly in like the kind of late 80s, was shown through TV, and that's definitely what my work was looking at. But then it is also, I'm in some of my videos, I'm challenging stereotypes. I'm looking at stereotypes in a huge kind of, well, a wide range of stereotypes, looking at them in a different way. But yeah, I think that it's all different ways that I've kind of developed these characters and different reasons I have them. So
do you feel like there's anything that you haven't, like, obviously with each of your films you're kind of exploring quite slightly different things, is there anything that you haven't looked at properly yet, or you haven't properly scrutinized within your work that you think, I really want to look at that at the moment, or anything in the kind of media at the moment that's sort of inspiring you to think a certain way, like what's next kind of thing?
I really want to do a series based on TikTok.
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
That's something which I'm really interested in, these kind of bizarre dancing videos, especially that people are doing, and I've never seen anything like it, where especially I think it's probably surrounded by kids all the time who are doing these bizarre but quite sweet dances all the time. And I think that kind of, and it's definitely a female that, like, I've noticed it in young girls, young boys, like they have a kind of different way of kind of, they do the same kind of thing, but they do a similar thing with their dances. But it's these dances that these girls do, I really want to kind of explore that a bit in my work, because I am quite interested in what they're doing and why they're doing it. And like, feels so impulsive now that these kids are doing these dances. I mean, and adults as well. But yeah, that's probably like the next thing that I'd like to look at. But I think it probably more broadly is around some of the stuff. And again, since going to teaching, is looking at like kind of trends in schools. So if it's like the kind of latest fad, or if it's like the language and that kind of stuff. And that's definitely what I see is like the kind of next area, is looking more at kind of teens rather than a more gendered work that I'm usually doing.
That's nice, because that kind of brings our conversation around full circle. We started talking about school, and we've kind of come back to like where you are now and talking about, you know, TikTok is something that's very much kind of youth based, isn't it? And yeah, that's really, really interesting that your work is kind of, I mean, would you say your work is kind of informed by what you're doing now and about the people around you, or would you just say that you have gone into your job because that's where your interests lie, sort of thing?
I think it's probably more the first one. I think that there's definitely, my work is, I mean, I know you'll know, as being a teacher, you're in school like 100 hours a week, whatever it is a thing that is most of my time, and I think it's kind of a natural process would be to respond to it. And there's also, in the school with kids, there's so much going on, and there's so much kind of content there, and I think that using that is kind of, hopefully can help my work, but also help theirs, or help me be a teacher as well.
I'm conscious that I don't want to keep you forever, and we could literally just ask you questions forever.
I feel like that came to quite a nice, natural kind of circle, though. That was great. Yeah. And just thank you so much for all of your all of your amazing kind of things that you've said. It's been really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really am so honoured that you wanted to get me involved in this.
It's a pleasure. Hold on. Go.
Why are we holding on?
I was finishing chewing.
Oh, right. Boop. So, hello. We're Sarah. You gotta wave when I wave. It doesn't look right if you don't wave when I wave. Right. I'm cutting this again. Right. Okay.